Hey, it's Jave and Allison from Two Dudes Reviews. We are at the legendary Sattui Winery in lovely Napa Valley. This was actually the first winery that we ever went to when we first came to Napa Valley back in 1999. We're with our friends Joe and Tammy here, decided to spend a weekend with us. Joe helps out behind the scenes with some of the production elements. And Mark, this is your room. What a gorgeous place.
You know, and absolutely. The Vittorio room, as we affectionately call it, we do list it on our tasting list as the tower, just to make it a little bit easier, I think, on folks to be able to find it. They look around and spot the tower, but affectionately known as the Vittorio room after the V and V Sattui. So
okay.
To me, it's really the most special place on the property, and a room that I only open a couple days a week to be able to show off at least what I'm going to tell you is our best wines, at least at that point in time.
Okay. Well, we're dying to know before we start with some of the tastings. Just give us a really brief history on the winery here and Mr. V Sattui and all that good stuff.
Yeah, and it's real quick and simple as we're only in our 137th year. So,
yeah.
But what's fortunate for me, what makes it easier, is that in this room we house a lot of the historical photos that have kept track of what's gone on in this family. So here on the front wall you can see photos of the little village of Carsi, Italy, and that's in northern Genova. And Vittorio, the V, as I mentioned, brought his family over in 1882. And they were simply escaping Italy in a time when it just wasn't doing so great. A famine and economic destruction. And America was pretty tantalizing. And instead of Ellis Island being the port of call of popularity, it was San Francisco, as like newspaper titles in the late 1800s were reading like golden nuggets lying in the streets of California. So,
wow.
But it really was more just about a promise of a new beginning. And he brought his wife Caterina and their 3 children. And in the spirit of the Io of Vittorio, his 2 sons were Mario and Romeo. And freakishly, Romeo had a twin sister who anyone's guess could be
Juliet.
And so,
Julieta.
Yeah. So they came to San Francisco and settled in still today what is very much what we would call Little Italy, known as the North Beach area. And he was simply a humble bred baker by trade, although all good Italian boys, would make wine, and it's sort of like that mix and match barrel in the basement for the family upstairs.
For sure.
He would deliver loaves of bread by horse-drawn carriage around the neighborhood, and one day someone, I think, more or less stood up and said, "Listen, I guess no one else is going to be the bearer of bad news, but your bread, quite horrible. But that wine I've had out of your basement, that's
pretty
really
legit.
Good. Maybe you should take that on." And
yeah.
so he did. He took the leap of faith, and in the year of 1885 opened the winery. And was faced right away with a very big problem, which is simply, commerce was there. That's where the people were, but the grapes were up here in Napa Valley. And so in the spirit of utilizing child labor, when everything about that was okay, he would put young son Mario in the horse-drawn carriage and do about a 2.5 day dirt road journey up here to Napa Valley after being ferried across the bay where, of course, now the Golden Gate Bridge would lie.
Wow.
And would put a giant pile of cab grapes or whatever he could find in the back of the wagon, turn around, make the journey back down, deliver it to brother and dad, and they'd make now wine instead of bread in that basement. And you can see that would be displayed there in that photo. So you can see some of the family and then just some neighborhood folk hanging out down there in now what is now the winery. And brilliantly, Vittorio knew and was being told his wine, his product was so fantastic. And he thought, well, I'm still going to have to compete and market. I mean, even in those days, you walked into a store and you could find French wines and things. So he wanted to cut out all the middlemen, and he invented direct-to-consumerism. So out went the loaves of bread, and in went whole what we call demijohns. And there are some on display, actually, from the original journeys over there on the table.
Wow, look at those.
Growler nowadays, but the wicker wrap bottles. And even maybe a whole barrel of his wine would go in the back of that wagon, and he would just go around the neighborhood ringing a bell. I mean, like an ice cream man. And instead of the kids running out, it was the adults. And if you had your own demijohn, you could tap that barrel, or you could buy a pre-made one and just pay for the volume. And these guys did quite well. And if you can, from your position, see that photo, there's Mario probably switching over from 2 horsepower up to, I don't know, 13 or whatever. They finally got a Ford Model T involved.
Wow.
And that all went quite swimmingly for them right up until Prohibition. And of course, that
killed everything.
Majority of everything.
Yeah.
And it does. I don't know of a lot of families who actually have this much of history, captured. So, it even goes on into the next rooms here.
Well, we're here to taste some of the history. So what are we going to start with, Mark? Tell us about it.
Well, and maybe I reverse on you a little bit, is that just to kind of tie into the history that I just told you a bit about, we're going to finish with a wine that actually encapsulates all of that history into one bottle. So I'll just leave that as a tantalizer for now.
I love Sattui, yeah.
It's a good problem most of us winos experience. At some point or another, you start looking at your credit card bill and you're like, whoa, okay. So this is more than just, a slight fun thing to do.
It's like, honey, I'm so glad you're working.
Yeah.
Do you have a big influence on the deli and some of the foods?
We have a completely separate set of chef and staff that do those things. What you're going to find today is that I brought up some truffle chips from our deli, and then also some chocolates, some truffles that we do make here in-house. This is done by Kat, but she and I love to talk a lot about what would pair best with some of our, more rare or older cabs. And so the food pairing, lessons I'll kind of just toss in as we're tasting.
Okay.
Quite honestly, the chocolates, wait till we get down into the cabs.
Yep.
And then one especially I have for that special wine I'm going to end tasting with.
Okay.
But these truffle chips are going to be a great pairing actually with this Chardonnay. So
Okay.
I was like, I want some salt.
Yeah.
Is the
that's what I started with here. Now, when you see our fancy hand-dipped wax top bottles here, that's what designates our finest line, or at least what we're going to tell you is our best shot at you, or what we call reserve stock. And that is a term that you really do need to be aware that there is no law that denominates what makes a reserve. So many people abuse it. You can just stamp the words on anything every year and charge a few more bucks because people are like, oh, that looks cool, that's reserved. But here we take the note from Mother Nature that something's gone really right in that certain vintage on that certain varietal. And of course, that is not going to be every year in every variety. That's a perfect world. But when we see that she gives us that cue, we go out and essentially by eye, we cherry pick our best vineyards for their best fruit. But then we narrow it down to only the best barrels from that. So in this case, we wound up at just over 4,000 bottles.
Wow.
In the wine world, that
Not a
might
ton.
sound like a big number, but that's usually a case number in most places.
Yeah.
Not a bottle number. So we're looking at around 7 barrels worth on average when we make a reserve wine. And sometimes there's many years in between releases of reserve. So it's narrowing it down, to the best of our best. Now, this is also, involving the brand new French oak barrels, which is the spare no expense.
Yeah.
They're really brand new ones.
Yep.
You get that real rich kind of vanilla and caramel finish because of it. Little bit of nutty almond, but the fruit is bright. And the citrus, the apple, the pear, and then the balancing act is what we call malolactic fermentation, and that's the wine geeky speak for the buttery, creamy part. And we limit this one, so you can say, hey, 0, and that's really crisp and acidic, or you can say 100, and that's like a melted stick of butter in there.
Yeah.
And this is at 85%, so we give room for that balance with the acids and the fruits to show up front.
Allison, I'm curious because you arguably have one of the best palates out of the 4 of us here. What's your take on that Chardonnay from 2018? It's a reserve stock Chardonnay.
Oh, it's really crisp in the beginning, like super crisp and fresh on the top of your tongue. And then as you drink, swallow it down, it gets velvety. It's really good.
I'm not getting that overwhelming butter that I would get with a lot of oak-aged Chardonnays, which I think is good. When you say crisp, are you talking about grapefruit crisp? Are you talking about green apple crisp? Are you talking about citrus, or what is the crispness?
No, I get like green apple, but then when you swallow it, it's more like a pear. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, it's very soft. Yeah.
A lot of people pick up on that vanilla and pear that's showing in this wine.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous wine. I'm kind of snooty with the shards, and so are you.
Well, and the thing is that I'm a total straight shooter, and I was up front that I choose these wines, and you can see where more of my happy places are is more in the red zone. Also, I tell people every day I'm an ABC drinker, which at large that would mean anything but Chardonnay. It takes it takes a very special one for me to go, oh wow, I want to show this as one of the one slots that I can use this quarter on my list up here. And so when I came along this one, and of course it's all done blind, and so I don't know, what's in there, but I am, been in the industry some time, and you can tell when you've got a Chardonnay.
Why can one winery charge or have such dynamite juice when the winery right next door might be inferior, even though it's the same topography, the same weather, kind of the same soil if you're in the same latitude, altitude? What's the difference? Does it all really boil down to the winemaker and the blending, or?
I think that there is poetic license in winemaking.
Yeah.
Part of it, but again, really, Mother Nature is mostly in charge when you're making wine. And what can change the ball game here in Napa Valley so greatly of why one on this side of the street you like, but one on the other you don't, is that in just 30 miles long that's known as Napa Valley, we have over 100 soil types and over 100 microclimates.
Wow.
And so depending upon what side of the street you're on, your same fruit can taste very, very different. And then, it comes down to what you do with it after it's harvested. So what kind of barrel you use, what you might blend into that varietal typically, just how it's treated through the recipe of winemaking that you have.
Yeah.
And our style here is that everything is very fruit driven. I mean, even in our boldest, richest reds, you still get fruit forwardness, and then the tannins, the seriousness are like backup singers. And that is a style that people really like about us, where there's another camp of folks, and there's nothing negative about either side of it, is that they don't like that. They want more of a rich, tannic, dark, dry experience. And that's fine because we have that diversity here in the valley. Pinot and also Chard that need a little bit cooler climate than we are right here in Napa Valley. Now we also grow a few other Pinot Noirs down in southern Napa Valley in Los Carneros, as far north as Old Hippie Boonville up in Mendocino County.
Yeah.
And even in some years past, we're down in the San Lucia Highlands with one of ours.
How many acres does the family own as far as grape growing is concerned? And do you guys ever use outside grape sources for your wines?
We're quite blessed and really quite the flip of most wineries. Most of our work is an estate, which means, of course, that's a property the winery owns, and we would be the farmer and the vintner on that. The things that we do source, we're quite blessed, that some of them are exclusive. We're the only, so we might as well. And we work alongside with the farmer, and we're just basically leasing their land. Or maybe only a couple of people that get their grapes. And we're going to be seeing definitely some of those wines, which I'll speak to too. But whenever you see the word estate, that's completely, owned and controlled by the winery. Okay. And all of our wines, guys, by the way, are made right down this hallway. So our lab is right here, our winemaker offices, our fermentation room, our balling line, everything is done 100% right here. Now, what's really fun about this, well, two things I would say is that this beat out our fancy hand-dipped wax top version, which we have not had a reserve stock Pinot in some years, but it was in the blind, and I chose this because of its sultriness and because it was a richer style, and in a really good use of the word, I think it's kind of an atypical Pinot. So typically you get a greater, sharper acidity, a leaner body, and also what I call the Pinot funk, which is a good thing, but if that's that earthy spice, this is minus on all those things I just said. So we go right from our press into brand new French oak on this, so fermentation done in there. And these barrels are ordered at, that heavier charring, or what they call medium plus toast.
Okay.
And that's what fetches that richer and caramel-like finish. So we lose that tart acidity without the sweetness.
Wow.
I think that's really part of the magic, and it drinks, a lot of people say, oh, it drinks almost like a Merlot.
Yeah.
It's a richer body, so that dark cherry with the caramel-like finish. And I just thought, God,
But it still has a nose of a Pinot. You get that pepper right off the nose.
but more like light baking spice on the palate.
Yeah.
I get like little hints of cherry and...
Stone fruit?
Yeah, I mean, I get like cherry, and then I smell like, it's not cardamom, but I smell spice.
I get a bit of like an allspice, bacon spices.
Yeah.
But it's very faint.
Yummy.
It's not like a big player. Eggs were bad for us, now they're good for us again.
Yeah.
Wine goes through similar type changes, and one of the things that's come up, especially in this last decade, has been blends. And blends, especially on the lighter side, just easier to drink, accessible, have become more popular. And so we have let out a couple of those things. One of them is really fun because it does actually pay homage to the family heritage. In fact, there's Mario on the horse-drawn carriage making wine deliveries. Yeah. This is our L'America. And we're a few years into this, but this is emulating the what they would do back in those days, that kitchen sink blend, as we were calling it. But these are things that people really love, and of course they're not heralding and the same kind of fame or walking the red carpet of 100% Cabernets and things like that. So they're more affordable, and they're enjoyable, and they're people, and they're food friendly, and so this is a new trend. And so we have come out with a wine such as that, but also we've come out with a GSM, we call Entanglement, which is a very playful, fun wine. And those
GSM seems to be a keyword that we keep hearing a lot in the last 2 years.
Case in point is that they are gaining a lot of ground.
Yeah.
That's fun.
GSM, by the way, Grenache, Syrah, Mourvedre as a blend. And we have had some, we had in Paso Robles at Herman Story, was it a MSG? Yeah. There was something else that was prominent in it, and they mixed around the lettering of it. But GSMs are very, very nice blends.
This Pinot makes me crave a pork chop.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that. Like a Neiman Marcus pork chop. Neiman Ranch. It's a funny thing. It happened years ago at a nice steakhouse, in fact. I said, yeah, I'll have the Neiman Marcus pork chop. And the guy looked at me like, you idiot. Oh, by the way, there's also a story on the cats. There's always cats roaming around the grounds here at V Sattui. Mark, any logic to shed on the cat situation?
There used to be one king cat, and that was Steve. And now
Steve.
So most of our winery cats here, and by the way, they do earn their keep. They are on a farm, so they're quite happy, and they do help us out. But they're named after legends of V Sattui. Steve Lee was someone that I really would still aspire to be.
As far as an afternoon picnic is concerned, where you can taste the wine, grab a bottle of your favorite, open it up right here on the grounds, grab all your groceries. V Sattui just can't be beat. I mean, it's the total well-rounded experience for sure.
Now, what I just poured for you guys, I just opened. I'm joining you with it because this is actually right now, and these things change all the time, of course, because wines change, vintage change. But this is currently how I'm abusing my French vintage. This would be the comment of this is my house red. This is just my happy place. Now, when people learn I'm the wine and food pairing chef, and then they learn this is my favorite bottle, and they always first think, okay, so what do you pair with it? And I just say my porch. Because it doesn't mean anything, but it's going to be happy with all kinds of different foods. Now, that is not a task you typically give to Zinfandel. And there's a lot of misnomers around this grape. I am very partial to this because this is what I grew up doing. My family, just a mile up the street, we made Zinfandel primarily, a little bit of Cap too, but this was always like what I considered Mama's cooking. So I'd like to think I've had my fair share of the Valley styles, and I love a lot of them. But right now, these older vineyards tend to be giving us just the highest quality things. And we are known for having a handful of what they call old vine Zinfandel vineyards. And again, a term you have to ask every winery what it means. I was at a tasting the other day, and I got so excited there was an old vine Zin on the list, so right away I started asking questions. It was a 13-year-old vineyard. And I just kind of chuckled. I'm like, that's like our second crop. But
yeah.
It sounds awesome. You can charge a few more bucks, so you can abuse it. Here, the denominator would be fruit for at least 50 years. Now, these are so old that we call them ancient. Nice. The oldest soldiers in this vineyard are 129 this year, which means they would have been completely abandoned through Prohibition by this family as well, but they are dry farmed. So this is our Qualia Ancient Vine Zinfandel, farmed just a mile up the road. Only 3.2 acres that are left of these guys. And this is an old school Italian field blend. So instead of finished wine varietals coming together, they did it in the vineyard. So for every few rows of Zinfandel, you will see a row of things that don't look like it.
Interesting.
The Teat Syrah would be, and then a little bit of Carignan out there as well. So these things all ripen at different phases, but they are all harvested and fermented together. That's
Okay.
called the field blend. And they are completely on their own. I mean, old head prune, dry farming things. So this gives us, less than 2 tons an acre, where a young and thriving vineyard can crank you out, 3 times that much on an average year. So a real sacrifice by this family to go for that ultimate of quality over quantity. I had one final cab that I wanted to show off with, which is actually the one that I have designed to go with one of these truffles.
Okay.
So Kat, our in-house chocolatier, and I want you to the red one, which is a milk chocolate and
Are
raspberry
you telling me
chocolate.
which one to pick?
Yes, because the other one is for a different wine.
Okay.
But this is our Morosoli 2008. Now, Morosoli is coming out of the neck of the woods that is now the nickname, the Rodeo Drive of Napa Valley. This is Rutherford. Okay. One of the microappellations that truly pisses the French off a lot. Trust
I
me.
love it.
Yeah. So this, and I hate to be suggestible to people. I always want wines to just be their genuine, whatever they smell, whatever they taste. But I'm going to do it to you right now, because if you don't smell cherry cola,
Oh, I actually.
it's right up in your face.
Yeah.
I mean, you ever stuck your face to cherry Coke, you know the smell. And I don't favor that as a soda. But as an aged Cabernet, those qualities are insane. Now, it's really not like that on the palate. It's a richer, darker, drier wine on the palate. So that dark cherry fruit, very typical, what they call the Rutherford dust. And that's, sounds like a snooty way of saying earthy, but it really is not. It's a much more refined, as she kind of said, and as I often say, it's like the corner of an old library. Those dusty leather book bindings, even all the air around you kind of feels thick and elegant. And it's very long lasting on the palate. And this is, part of the wine and food pairing lesson. You always do the wine first, what it's like on its own, then have a bite of the truffle and go back to the wine. And what's really interesting is this has such a bright fruit forwardness to it, because these tannins are so supple at this age, that the wine could actually use a hand being a little richer in that area. And that's when we do these types of pairings. Now, this is actually what's called a contrast pairing. When people think if you put sweet on sweet, you make more sweet, and that is quite not the issue. No. It actually nullifies both of those things. So to make the tannins more stout, the body of the wine more stout, using that sweetness of the milk chocolate and that raspberry gelée inside. So over here, I'm going to pour some of what I say our cult comes here especially for.
Okay.
So sometimes, and I've been here a bit, so I'm a little freaky. I'll wander around the property and I'll walk up to people and go, "How many bottles of Madera are you here for?" They're like, "Oh my God, how'd you know?" That's like, "Oh, I ever come here, I'm in the cult, And it's really something that we take so much pride in. And as I told you in the beginning, this really does tie the family history all into a bottle. So, back in 1885, Vittorio began creating this, which is a Solera, and that's, created by essentially the most ingenious of drunken sailors way back on the island of Madera. But they needed an invincible sailor's grog, something that could never spoil in the days before modern preservational methods. So he knew this and began this blending of red wine and brandy in those years, but then hid it during Prohibition by building a false wall in the basement. And an entire generation goes by, and the building is sold actually a handful of times. And a gentleman purchases it and is remodeling,
down there.
knocks down a wall, and finds all these barrels of what he calls rotten wine.
Was
Oh,
it
no.
Here?
It was here in
Oh.
that building in
Oh,
San
is that
Francisco.
right? Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And he says, there's no way any of this stuff can be good. He thought it was all, old rotten wines. But there was some hand corking machines and things that had the Sattui family name on it that Vittorio was trying to keep.
Oh.
So he went down, grabbed it, began blending back in, started bottling, and reopened the family winery in March of 1976.
Oh, wow.
And years later, just this thing alone has supplied him with what we all know now as the Castillo de la Rosa. So
Yeah.
something that I would say we're famous for, but it's more infamous because, of course, unless you've been here or someone's introduced you to our stuff, you just don't know about it.
Right.
By the way, he's referring to the castle that is, 10 miles down the road here or so, and there's 3 or 4 floors on top of the castle and like 16 floors underneath the castle, or something ridiculous like that. It's a definite must-see when you come to the Napa Valley area.
But here's the thing, and like I said, I've been here a bit, but the number one thing I get about this is, Mark, we're in the cult, we're here to get to Madera, but you see all these scars? Just trying to get into these damn things. I tried to knife it, I tried to melt it, my pit bull chewed on it, and then I show them how to do it, and they're like, you son of a bitch.
All right, so show us. That's it. One hit upside down. Boom. Got it. I'll remember that.
God damn it, Mark.
Master Mark.
So, of course, you would just,
you get that
the
film?
art form of just tiny sips. This is not, again, not a drink a glass of me kind of thing. But what you're going to find, the massive hallmark of this wine is going to be caramel, toffee, pecan pie, and creme brulee jumped into a blender.
Oh.
So this is what you're going to want to pair with the second truffle that I gave to you, which is dark chocolate and honey from our estate right here.
Wow.
So big thanks to the entire staff here at Sattui. Allie Patterson, who just so happens to have the same name as my wife, Allison Patterson, set us up with the tasting and the review here today. And I'm telling you, if you're new to Napa Valley, you have to check out Sattui. Make it your lunch spot to stop off at. Not only is the tasting amazing, but there's all the food you could possibly imagine and plenty of area for you to have a lunch here. And if you've been in the Napa area, if you're familiar with Napa, and you've shied away from Sattui, give these guys another shot and see what's new, because the revolution is on, and they've got a young and invigorated staff who are really breaking the mold and doing some very unique, different things here. Jave, Allison, Tammy, I don't think you can see Joe on the end of the video over here, but it's Two Dudes Reviews. We'll see you next time.